The Orioles have acquired a left-handed pitcher named Suarez. Just not that one. More on that coming up on today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, January 16th, 2026, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to finish off the week with some more Orioles news and notes. The O's made an intriguing waiver claim, picking up left-handed pitcher José Suarez off waivers from the Braves. We'll talk about what he's done in his career with Anaheim and Atlanta and how he could potentially help the Orioles. Then we'll chat about a lot of the MASN news that has come out over the past few days. The Nats are leaving the network. It's already made it better for the Orioles, some broadcasting changes, and more coming up. And then finally, a couple other pieces of news and notes. We'll talk about Big Christmas staying in the organization and that wild Kyle Tucker deal with the Dodgers from Thursday night. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your Profit Boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So we start today's Friday episode with an Orioles waiver claim as it came across the wire on Thursday. The Orioles have claimed left-handed pitcher José Suarez off waivers from the Atlanta Braves. Of course, the O's had a full 40-man roster, so they had to make a roster move. And as was predicted last week, Marco Luciano, the infielder who the Orioles claimed off waivers last week, was DFA'd to make room for Suarez on the 40-man. The goal with Luciano has always been the same thing. You claim him, a couple weeks later, you DFA him, you hope he clears waivers, and then you can keep him in your system, which is exactly what the Orioles did with John Kenzie Noel, which we'll get to later in the show. But first, got to tell you about José Suarez. Who is he, and how could he help the Orioles? Well, he's a 28-year-old left-handed pitcher, just turned 28 earlier here in January, who spent 2025 with the Atlanta Braves organization. He had been with the Angels for his entire professional career until the Angels traded him to the Braves right before opening day in 2025 in exchange for Ian Anderson, a former top pitching prospect for the Braves who had kind of fallen on hard times. Suarez was a former top pitching prospect for the Angels who had kind of fallen on hard times. So it was one of those challenge trades where they swapped former struggling top prospects. And Suarez didn't really pitch much in the big leagues this year. It was 7 appearances, 1 start for the Braves. The numbers were good. He had a 1.86 ERA in the 19 and a third innings that he threw at the major league level with Atlanta this year. 4 earned runs, 15 hits, 16 Ks, 10 walks, and a homer allowed. But again, that is such a small sample size that you don't want to take too much out of what he did in the majors. He did make the Braves opening day roster as kind of a swingman long reliever. He was just kind of in 3 relief appearances, and then he was DFA'd in April for Orioles legend Scott Blewett to join the Braves roster. Now, Suarez at that point did clear waivers, and he went to AAA Gwinnett and stayed in the Braves organization. And down there, he pitched as a starter, and he was pretty good. He threw about 43 innings as a starting pitcher, had a 3.53 ERA, had a 28% strikeout rate to a 5% walk rate. Those are really good ratios, even though being down in AAA. He had one of the highest chase rates of any pitcher in AAA this year, and then he got injured. It was never disclosed what his injury was. It's sometimes really tough to find out exact injuries on minor league guys, especially when they're not on the 40-man roster, and Suarez was not when he got hurt. But he missed about 2 months in the middle of the minor league season with an injury, came back, made some rehab starts in high A and double A, and then returned to the AAA level in mid-August and made 4 starts back in August and early September in AAA and looked awesome. 20 innings, 6 runs, 23 strikeouts to 6 walks. That's a 2.7 ERA in that stretch. And at that point, the Braves season was over, right? Their year went very similar to the Orioles' year in 2025. Came in with high expectations, completely floundered early, played a little better down the stretch, but it dug way too big of a hole to ever come back into the playoff race. And so by September, like the Orioles, the Braves were a talented team, but they were out of it. So they were also looking anywhere and everywhere For pitching, they needed guys to start games. They signed Charlie Morton for the final day of the year to start one game. So they brought up José Suarez to start a game. They had a doubleheader on September 16th against the Nats. They needed a starter for game one, and so they called up Suarez. And what does he do? He gives them 7 innings of 2-run ball, 6 hits, 9 strikeouts, and 2 walks in a win in D.C. Now, it was mid-September for a bad Nats offense. It's not like, he took down the Dodgers in the middle of a pennant race, but it was still one of the better starts, at least of his recent big league career. He got 21 swings and misses on 50 swings. Simply, he was dominant that day. Now, there wasn't room for him to remain in the Braves rotation, but it was enough to keep him on the active roster for basically the rest of the year. Now, he only made 3 more relief appearances to finish off the season, but they were good. It was 5 scoreless innings in those 3 final relief appearances, and that was enough for the Braves to at least try and hold him on the roster for as long as they could. He is in arbitration. They agreed in ARB to pay him $900,000 for 2026. And, they could have outrighted him off the roster, but they tried to hold him on the 40-man for as long as they could this offseason. But last week, they tried to get sneaky and sneak him through waivers, and the Orioles weren't having it, claiming him on waivers on Thursday. So the Braves do lose him. If he does stick with the O's again, he would only be making $900,000 in 2026. So could be a pretty cheap arm. Now, in terms of who he is stuff-wise, it was a 99 stuff plus this year. It was a 101 in 2024. It's overall pretty solid stuff, especially if you see him as a starting pitcher. What we saw, specifically in that good start against the Nats, because that was the biggest sample size we got from him all season. 4-seam fastball at 94. It's got 18 inches of induced vertical break. It's a really good pitch, really good fastball, especially at that velocity. His changeup has always been his best pitch, throws it around 83. It's got good movement. He just attacks right-handed hitters all around the zone with that changeup, and they swing and miss against it a lot. It's his best whiff pitch. Then he's got a slider he uses versus lefties. It sits around 81. It's very side to side, doesn't have a lot of vertical movement on it, but it can be a weapon at times. And then there is a sinker at 93 and a curveball at 76. Each of those he'll drop in occasionally from time to time, both of them well under 10% usage on the season, although he used that curveball to good effect in that Nats start, so maybe something he wants to throw a little bit more moving forward. And really the thing with his changeup for Suarez is, yes, it's a weapon to get righties out, but he'll even throw a lot of changeups lefty because it just is his best pitch. So he's like, why not use it against all the hitters that I am facing? Now, he has been a reliever in the past, and that has allowed his velo to maybe tick up a little bit, but he's still throwing a ton of changeups and sliders as well, even when he does pitch out of the bullpen. Now, Suarez's history, again, it was all with the Angels before he got to Atlanta. He was an international free agent signing out of Venezuela by the Angels all the way back in 2014, and he was a really good prospect coming up through their system. He debuted in the big leagues in 2019 with Anaheim. At that point, he was the Angels' number 2 prospect, and he was a top 100 guy. He was ranked by Fangraphs the number 79 prospect in all of baseball when he debuted in 2019, was seen as a future solidifying part of the Angels' rotation. Now, it didn't go well early. He made 15 starts as a rookie in 2019 and posted a 7.11 ERA, so not a great debut. Made 2 starts in the shortened 2020 season that were not good and got optioned back to the alternate site for the rest of the year. But then he did kind of settle into a role at the big leagues in 2021. He made some starts, some relief appearances, really a swingman, and had a 3.75 ERA in 98 innings that year. So the Angels thought, okay, he's not going to be a top of the rotation starter, but we have a pitcher who's going to help us. And he won a rotation job in 2022, and he seemed to really have a spot set. Now, he didn't pitch the whole season, but he made 20 big league starts with a 3.96 ERA and a 3.91 FIP in 2022. And the Angels thought, hey, we have at least a 3 or 4 starter here in this really intriguing lefty. So, of course, he's back on the team in 2023, and that's when the injuries hit. He had a pretty severe shoulder strain. It kept him out for the majority of the 2023 season. He came back in 24, but he never looked right. He was awful early in the year, and the Angels actually DFA'd him in June. And he was so bad that despite being a former top prospect who was really good just 2 years prior, nobody even claimed him off waivers. He cleared waivers and remained in the Angels organization in AAA for the rest of the year. Angels figured he wasn't going to make the team in 25, so they traded him over to the Braves in spring training. Now, in terms of what the O's can do with him, like, hey, this is a former top 100 prospect who's still only 28 years old and has the stuff and has all the tools. And quite frankly, the Angels stink at developing pitching. It's crazy enough that he even got to the big leagues and had some success. So you got to think the Braves, a much better pitching development team than the Angels are, had a plan for Suarez when they went out and traded for him and gave up a real player in Ian Anderson to get him last spring training. But Suarez got hurt. He missed more than 2 months in the middle of the season. I'm sure the Braves didn't have as much time to implement what they wanted with Suarez, especially because, again, they got him, I think, 4 days before opening day. So it's not like they had him all offseason and had him in spring training to work on things. They only traded for him really right when the season began. And when you get injured as well, you don't have a lot of time to do development stuff. I'm sure the Braves' plan was for this offseason to be the big development with Suarez, but they weren't able to keep him on the roster as long as they wanted. I think there's a real chance the Orioles can unlock something with José Suarez. Now, again, as we've said with Jhonkensy Noel, and now with Marco Luciano, who was just DFA'd, the likely plan for the Orioles and Suarez is that they too are going to DFA him at some point later this offseason when they make their next 40-man roster move. They'll hope he clears waivers and hope that he stays in the Orioles organization. Now, I believe the interesting part of this is that if the Orioles were to DFA Suarez and he went unclaimed, he would have the opportunity to just become a free agent instead of staying in the Orioles organization in AAA. Whereas guys like Noel and Luciano, they would have to accept the AAA assignment. Suarez has been DFA'd enough times that I don't think he would have to accept it anymore. So that's another little piece of the puzzle here. But more than likely, the Orioles will have him kind of ride the DFA train like these other guys. But I think he's got more of a chance to help than these guys like Noel and Luciano. Like for Noel, it'd have to be a perfect string of other guys getting hurt for him to get a chance. For Luciano, it'd have to be, the Orioles don't sign another utility man. Jeremiah Jackson's not very good. Luciano looks good in AAA and maybe he gets a shot. For Suarez, it's like if the O's kept him and he looked good in spring training, there is a pretty clear opening that he could make the Major League opening day roster in the bullpen. Now, he is out of options, but he's cheap. If the O's keep him, he won't be a free agent until after 2027. So you would have 2 years of team control on José Suarez. The question is just, can you keep him on the roster into spring? Because if you do, he's got a legit shot to make this team. I mean, right now, this is something we just talked about on Wednesday's episode, kind of the state of the left-handed pitching in the Orioles bullpen. It is still, to me, a soft spot on this roster. Your 3-man guys are Keegan Aiken, Dietrich Enns, and Grant Wolfram, with a guy like Josh Walker, who's going to be in the mix in big league spring training as well. You throw Suarez in there, he's got, Keegan Aiken, I think, has thrown more innings. Maybe not. Honestly, Suarez has maybe thrown more innings than Keegan Aiken in the majors. Either way, Suarez has pretty similar major league track record to Keegan Aiken. He's got way more, as we know, than Enns and Wolfram and Josh Walker. And he gives you kind of a swingman thing that Aiken could theoretically still do, but doesn't really do anymore, that Enns could give you, not really Wolfram or Walker. But he could also start games for you, which I don't think any of those guys you would want if you needed him. It gives you more starting pitching depth. And it's just another interesting lefty. And that's where I think the Orioles have an opportunity to build more depth, is interesting lefties who could help them out of the bullpen. I do think they should sign a legit lefty to add to their pen, but they still haven't done that at this point this offseason. So the next best thing is kind of acquiring depth guys like this with big league experience. Like, he's thrown 396 big league innings. It's a 5.30 ERA, which is not exactly what you want in those innings. It's not like they've been great innings, but he's a former top prospect. He's still got the stuff. He was with a terrible, terrible pitching development organization. Maybe, just maybe, he can turn things around in the right spot if he can stay healthy. I think that would have happened had he been healthy in Atlanta last year. And maybe if the O's can find a way to keep him around, they could potentially do it in Baltimore this year. It's maybe a role that you'd rather have Cade Povich end up in, but Suarez is a Cade Povich-like with a lot more big league experience. Suarez, if he does get to spring training with the O's, will certainly get plenty of chances to prove his worth pitching in games. And Orioles fans, you're going to have a lot more chances to potentially watch him do it. We got some fun and interesting updates on MASN from the last couple of weeks. We'll get to all that broadcast stuff coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The divisional round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. And the boosts, they let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or even coaching. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So let's talk MASN here in just a moment. But first, Everydayer Club. I got to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day. You know you already live your team every day. Now you can take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Orioles with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month, or to save a little money, $50 per year. Just go to lockedonorioles.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes down here to learn more about joining the Everydayer Club. We got some MASN news over the past couple of weeks. Of course, MASN, Atlantic Sports Network, the Orioles' main broadcaster for a long, long time now. The big MASN news was from last year, right? The ongoing legal battle between the Nationals and the Orioles was finally essentially settled last year after a long, long battle. Getting David Rubenstein to come in and take over for the Angelos certainly helped settle that thing. It was a huge fight since the Nats became a thing back in 2005. They were on the broadcast network, but the Orioles owned the network, and the Orioles were getting the large majority of the revenue from that network. It was getting a little bit bigger every year, the chunk the Nats were getting, but they were suing for how much money. It was a debacle and a disaster. Nobody had fun during any of that, but that was over. And then we started to learn that, hey, the Nats might not even be with MASN beyond 2025. And that finally became official last week, as we knew the Nats contract for TV was up in February. And the question was, would they try to stay with MASN for maybe one more year? They did not. The Nationals are officially leaving MASN. They're going to be one of the now 7 teams, I believe, that is having their games broadcasted by Major League Baseball. Either stay that way or whether they potentially find another place to broadcast their game. So for the Nats, the way that works, getting broadcasted by Major League Baseball, it allows fans to basically pay a seasonal price, either a monthly price or a cheaper per month seasonal price, to stream every game if they're in market with no blackouts. If you're out of market, you would still just get MLB TV Nationals package and you can watch them like that. But if you're in market, it basically gives you a direct-to-consumer streaming option that some teams still don't have. You just pay a price, you can stream the games, and MLB will work with local cable providers. Around here, it's a lot of Xfinity and others that will either find a channel or create a channel on Xfinity that would just be for the Nationals. So essentially, in DC or in this area, you could ask to just get that channel added to your cable package, and that would give you all the Nats games. They'd basically only be showing the pre and post game shows and the games, and that's it. So there are also, the Diamond Sports, FanDuel, Bally, whatever sports network that has like 9 Major League Baseball teams, which is going broke and close to bankrupt again. So that's being an issue. So there's probably more teams that are going to be broadcasted by Major League Baseball, maybe even this offseason. That's another thing with the league moving forward. For the Orioles, they are still going to be on MASN, but there's no longer going to be 2 channels. MASN 2 officially no longer exists, because when you only need one team, you only need one MASN. So MASN is the main channel. That's going to show O's Extra, pre and post game. It's going to show every Orioles game that's not on some other national TV or postseason game. And there is still MASN Plus, which allows you to get in-market streaming for the Orioles. But David Rubenstein, even when he bought the team, I don't think saw MASN as an asset. It doesn't have a lot of value, it seems like, monetarily in that package. It's not a really good place to work either. It's just a little bit of a disaster and has been for a long time. I'm not sure I see MASN as just the Orioles thing holding on for much longer. Like we're going to have it for 2026. I still think there'd be question marks beyond the 2026 season in what MASN looks like. Now, all of the baseball TV deals, national and otherwise, end after 2028. And Rob Manfred, who is planning to retire before the 2029 season as baseball commissioner, his big goal is to kind of, in that offseason after 2028, the final big move he'll make as commissioner is selling the TV rights one more time. And he wants to sell everything at once. That is his plan. Not only does he want the national packages, the Sunday Night Baseball, the All-Star Game, the playoff games, all that stuff, he also wants the regional games, all 30 teams, to be sold as a single package and go to one place. The most likely place that would go is probably some sort of package through ESPN on ESPN Plus. It's similar to what the NHL has right now, where if you get ESPN Plus, you can watch all the out-of-market games in the NHL as well. There'll probably be an extra fee you pay to get all of the teams, including blackout free, in-market stuff, so you could watch the Orioles through the larger ESPN package. That's probably what's going to be the case. You could get all the teams, including the Orioles, starting in the 2029 season. But that's kind of already starting with a chunk of teams in 2026 and especially in 2027. A lot of MLB TV has basically been bought up and absorbed by ESPN. And the service of MLB TV is going to go through ESPN, I believe, starting in the 2026 season. It's going to work the same, but you'll basically get it through ESPN as well. Now, that's kind of the bigger picture broadcast stuff. The more specific Orioles stuff is, at least for 2026, it seems like the Nationals being gone is a good thing so far for the Orioles broadcast situation. The O's announced that they will be broadcasting 20 spring training games. I believe out of the 30-ish total that they play, 20 will be broadcasted on MASN live this spring. That is by far the most they've ever broadcast. I mean, the last couple of years was like 6, 7, 10 maybe at most. They're going to broadcast 20 spring training games, gives you so much more ability to watch these players in spring, just watch baseball as the season gets closer, finally evening them up with what most teams offer, which is around 20 games to watch in spring training. So, hey, maybe MASN was so bad because they also had the Nats. Maybe without the Nats, this will be a much better network. We will certainly see. But also got some broadcaster news as well, as we learned The Athletic reporting last week that Kevin Brown, Orioles lead broadcaster, is reportedly a candidate to call MLB games on NBC. NBC kind of bought one of the main national baseball packages this year that used to be at ESPN. So NBC starting this season will have Sunday Night Baseball. ESPN no longer has Sunday Night Baseball. So NBC and Peacock will have Sunday Night Baseball. They will also have the old Roku Sunday morning leadoff package as well. Now, Andrew Marchand at The Athletic is reporting that Jason Benetti, who is the Tigers announcer and also does a bunch of stuff for Fox Sports, is the lead candidate to be the NBC lead baseball broadcaster with Kevin Brown in the mix. So it seems like what the most likely scenario is, Jason Benetti would do Sunday Night Baseball and Kevin Brown would do those Sunday leadoff Sunday morning games. Either way, most likely we will not have Kevin Brown calling Orioles games on most Sunday broadcasts this year. But this, let me say this does not mean Kevin is leaving the Orioles or the broadcast team. Joe Davis calls the World Series, the NFL, and college football, and still calls a ton of Dodgers games on TV as their local announcer. Now, he doesn't call close to 162, but he calls plenty of games. That seems like it's going to get closer and closer to that because Kevin is so freaking good. He's going to get more and more jobs outside of the Orioles. And he already has those jobs. He leaves for a while in May and June to do the college softball tournament and the Women's College World Series. He leaves sometimes on the weekends in fall because he does college football games on Saturdays. He also calls a ton of college basketball for ESPN in the winter as well. So he already has tons of jobs and is known as a national broadcaster. If he gets this gig, it means he's not going to call Orioles games on Sundays unless the Orioles are on that Roku leadoff package, which they are a couple of times this year. It's cool for Kevin. Eventually, could he leave the Orioles? Potentially, but a lot of broadcasters still do the local games and do a ton of other national stuff as well. So it's very, very true that Kevin Brown could get to the top of the mountain in terms of national broadcaster and still be doing Orioles games, maybe a little less Orioles games, but still be doing a large chunk of Orioles games on TV for MASN or whatever it is during the season. What that does mean is going to be more TV games for Ben Wagner, who came over from the Blue Jays radio booth in 2024, did mostly radio games that year, did more TV games last season in 2025. He's done a ton of radio as well. He will be kind of the main backup TV broadcaster with Kevin maybe being gone a little bit more. That means more series and games for Ben Wagner. Melanie Newman is still here, although she basically no longer gets any play-by-play games on TV or radio, so does mostly pre and post game and sideline. along with Rob Long. The Orioles did let Jeff Arnold's contract expire, so he will not be back. He had done a ton of radio and a tiny bit of TV over the last handful of years for the Orioles. He won't be back. Brett Hollander is back as the main radio voice. It'll basically be a lot of Brett Hollander and Ben Wagner on the radio with Kevin on TV. And then the Orioles did add Josh Lewin to their broadcast team as well. I figured they would add at least one new broadcaster. Lewin, who is the radio play-by-play voice for UCLA basketball and football, is rejoining the Orioles, where he actually worked in Baltimore for a little bit. He hosted a sports talk show on WBAL radio back in 1994, and he was a fill-in broadcaster on the Orioles radio broadcast in 95 and 96, and then left and bounced around different teams in the major leagues during the summer while he's called UCLA since the 90s as well. He's done some national games as well, and Josh will be filling in on some Orioles radio broadcasts and seemingly potentially some MASN TV broadcasts when Kevin Brown is not there, so we certainly welcome him back to the Orioles broadcast team. But those are the big updates. I think the coolest one is that 20 spring training games. You know what? You rid yourself of the Nationals from MASN, things seemingly get a little bit better. Just a couple more pieces of Orioles news and notes to get to coming up next. Big Christmas, minor league signings. Kyle Tucker, what in the world? That's coming up to finish off the show. So just a couple more things to get to here. Let's start with Big Christmas is staying in the Orioles organization. Lucked about how the Orioles planned with him all along. They claimed him off waivers from the Guardians a couple of weeks ago. Then they DFA'd him a couple days later when they claimed Marco Luciano. The plan was you claim him, you DFA him, you hope he clears waivers and he stays in the organization. That is exactly what happened. We learned earlier this week that Noel did clear waivers, so he will go to AAA Norfolk. He will remain in the Orioles organization, but he is no longer on the 40-man roster, so the Orioles can freely begin him on the Norfolk Tides roster to begin the year, work with him on the swing and miss, harnessing the power, and maybe he's a guy that they can unlock something in Ryan O'Hearn style to help the team potentially as early as 2026. Couple former Orioles signing elsewhere. Sean Dubin signed a minor league contract with the D-backs, right-handed reliever who came to the O's on waivers in September. Gave the Orioles 8 innings of 3-run ball out of the bullpen. He was actually really good. First 6 appearances were scoreless. Then he gave up 3 earned runs in his final outing and got hurt. Went out with a season-ending elbow injury. Andy Kuska did report that he was healthy and didn't need surgery in the offseason, but the Orioles still outrighted him off the roster, and the D-backs signed him to a minor league deal. And the other one, right-handed reliever Corbin Martin, has signed a minor league deal with the Cubs. He was a former Astros high draft pick under Mike Elias, came to the Orioles on waivers in 2024, got back to the big leagues with the O's in the bullpen in 2025. He actually pitched in 17 games, gave the O's 18 innings. It was a 6 ERA with a 26% K rate and a 10% walk rate. It's a fastball at 96 with good ride, an insane curveball. It's really, really good stuff. He actually got 2 saves for the Orioles. They're 2 of the most memorable games, I think, of the season. Like those tightrope saves. One was against the Blue Jays at home. One was when he got huge 3 outs and extra innings in Boston. Had 0 command and had some pretty terrible outings, but also had some awesome outings with really good stuff. I thought for sure the Orioles would try to bring him back on a minor league deal just because of the connection to Elias and the stuff and the amount he pitched last year. But I guess he found a better spot on a minor league deal with the Cubs, and he is there. And then speaking of the Cubs, the last thing to talk about is Kyle Tucker. Of course, traded from the Astros to the Cubs last year. We thought maybe there's a connection because he was drafted by Mike Elias in Houston. It'd be an awesome big play signing. There was talk early in the offseason he's going to get, a 10-year, $400 million deal. As the offseason went on, it seemed more and more likely he was going to get a shorter-term deal. The Mets were in the mix. And, of course, what news breaks Thursday night? Kyle Tucker signs with the Dodgers. A 4-year, $240 million contract, which is insane. That is a new record. A player making $60 million per year, and only $30 million of it is deferred. So most of that money is coming up front. Reportedly, the Mets offer was 4 years, $220 million. So the Dodgers beat it by a little bit with some deferred money. Listen, other owners can absolutely compete better. They need to compete better. They're crying poor when they're not. They should be spending more money. But I also think it's the truth that with the Guggenheim Group and Mark Walter and the way it's set up for the Dodgers and having Shohei Ohtani and all the revenue he brings in, they probably can spend more money than any other team can, and they flex that with adding Kyle Tucker, the best free agent on the market, to a team that's already won the last 2 World Series. As a fan of really any of the other 29 Major League Baseball teams, it is annoying. I am not in favor of a salary cap. Even after this signing, I am still not in favor of a salary cap. I think it would really, really hurt the players, especially. I don't think the union's going to go for it anyway in next offseason CBA negotiations. I just don't think they would ever agree to a cap. But you can still feel 2 ways about something. And the other way I feel is it is just annoying that the Dodgers have the ability to sign these players. Like, even though the Orioles under Rubenstein this offseason have jumped into a different kind of economic realm of Major League Baseball, they're still nowhere close. And really nobody is. Even the Mets and even what the Blue Jays are doing are not close to what the Dodgers are doing. And it's just annoying. And Major League Baseball is still a crapshoot, and it's still not better than good chances that the Dodgers win a 3rd straight World Series, but they are the best team once again. And the best team just got better, spending unreal amounts of money. How this connects to the Orioles, besides the fact that they may have had, it was reported they had at least talked to Kyle Tucker earlier in the offseason. How it affects the Orioles more is, the Orioles missed out on Ranger Suarez because the Red Sox didn't get Alex Bregman, so they pivoted and gave that money to Ranger Suarez. I'm worried that with the Mets missing on Kyle Tucker, we know the Mets have strong reported interest in Framber Valdez. They could just pivot and give that money to Framber Valdez, maybe more than the Orioles are willing to spend. The only thing that makes me feel okay is all the reporting this offseason is that David Stern and the Mets do not feel comfortable giving out long-term deals to free agent starting pitchers, kind of similar to how we believe that Mike Elias and the Orioles feel. So if Framber wants 5 or 6 years, maybe he won't be getting that deal, but I think the Mets are going to be willing to give out a lot of money over a 4-year deal to Framber. It's going to be up to the Orioles to beat that. We shall see. But either way, market is certainly heating up. Wouldn't be surprised if guys like Framber and Bo Bichette sign pretty soon. And by the end of January, pretty much every big-time free agent has found a team leading into spring training in February. That'll do it for today's episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. If you're a listener, make sure to subscribe, follow the show wherever you listen, 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Really helps us out as well. If you have got a question for the show, mailbag question, want to talk some ball, you can always email me at lockedonorioles@gmail.com. And remember, if you want more Locked On Orioles, if you want no ads, if you want to get in on the Discord, chat Orioles with me and other O's fans, and so much more, sign up for the Everydayer Club. The link is in the show notes. It's $5 a month. It's $50 per year to get even more Locked On Orioles. Unless we get some big-time news, I will be back on Monday. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.